I was cleaning out my grandmother's attic when I found it, a rolled-up map tucked inside a rusted tin box. At first glance, it looked like any other antique map, yellowed with age and marked with strange symbols that didn't match any language I'd ever seen. But then I noticed something unsettling. The map had my name on it, not written in ink or pencil, but woven into the fabric of the paper itself, as if the fibers had been grown to spell Evelyn in faint, looping cursive. My grandmother passed away years ago, and she wasn't the kind of person who left behind cryptic gifts. She was practical, almost painfully so, always telling me stories about how our family survived by being cautious, by trusting only what we could see and touch. So why would she leave me this? And more importantly, why did the map seem wrong? The longer I looked at it, the more details emerged. It wasn't just a map of some distant land. It was a map of here, my house, my town. Even the street where I lived was drawn with eerie precision, down to the cracked sidewalk outside my front door. But there were places marked on the map that didn't exist anymore, like the old library that burned down when I was a kid, its ruins now overgrown with weeds. Except on the map, the library was intact, labeled with tiny letters that read, "The Quiet Place." That night, I couldn't sleep. The map sat on my kitchen table, unrolled and refusing to stay still. Every time I glanced at it, the symbols seemed to shift slightly, rearranging themselves into patterns I couldn't quite decipher. Around 3 a.m., I heard it, a soft whisper coming from a map. At least, I thought it was the map. The sound was faint, almost imperceptible, like someone speaking through layers of thick fabric. I leaned closer, trying to make out the words, and that's when I saw it move. Not the paper itself, the ink. The lines and symbols began to crawl across the surface, twisting and turning until they formed a single sentence. Find me. Now, here's the thing. I'm not an adventurous person. I don't go looking for trouble, and I definitely don't chase after creepy voices coming from magical maps. But I couldn't ignore it. Something about those two words burrowed into my mind, gnawing at me until I felt like I had no choice. Against every instinct screaming at me to burn the damn thing, I decided to follow it. The next morning, I started at the library, or rather, where the library used to be. The lot was empty except for a few charred beams sticking up like broken teeth. I unfolded the map again, holding it steady despite the trembling in my hands. Sure enough, the spot where the library once stood was marked with an X. Beneath it, new words had appeared. Listen for the whispers. At first, I heard nothing. Just the wind rustling through the grass and the distant hum of traffic. Then, slowly, the whispers came back. They weren't coming from the map this time. They were all around me, swirling in the air like disembodied voices. Some sounded angry, others sad, but one voice stood out above the rest. It was calm, almost soothing, and it repeated the same phrase over and over. You're close. I don't know what made me dig. Maybe it was desperation, maybe curiosity, or maybe the map had already taken hold of me in ways I didn't understand. Whatever the reason, I grabbed a stick and began scraping at the ground near the center of the rubble. After an hour of digging, my hands raw and blistered, I hit something solid. A wooden trapdoor, half buried beneath the dirt. It took all my strength to pry it open. Inside was a narrow staircase leading down into darkness. For a moment, I hesitated, staring into the abyss while the whispers grew louder, more insistent. Then I realized something even stranger. The whispers weren't just coming from below, they were echoing from behind me too. I turned around slowly, heart pounding, and froze. Standing at the edge of the lot was a figure wearing a long coat, their face obscured by shadows. They held something in their hand, a second map, identical to mine. Before I could react, they spoke, their voice low and deliberate. You shouldn't have come here, they said. She doesn't like visitors. And then they smiled. The figure didn't move, but their smile widened in a way that made my stomach churn. I wanted to run, to scream, but my legs felt like they were rooted to the spot. My mind raced with questions. Who was this person? What did they mean by she doesn't like visitors? And most importantly, who or what was she? Before I could respond, the stranger tilted their head slightly, as if listening to something only they could hear. Then, without another word, they turned and walked away, disappearing into the shadows of the overgrown lot. I stood there for what felt like an eternity, clutching the map so tightly that its edges dug into my palms. Finally, the whispers returned, louder now, almost deafening. Go, they hissed. Find her. I didn't want to go down those stairs. Every fiber of my being screamed at me to leave, to forget about the map and the whispers and the unsettling figure in the coat. But the map, it wasn't just guiding me anymore. It was pulling me. The symbols on its surface seemed to pulse faintly, glowing with a warmth that radiated against my skin. I couldn't resist. With trembling hands, I pulled out my phone and switched on the flashlight app before descending into the darkness. The staircase led to a long, narrow corridor carved out of stone. The air was damp and cold, carrying the faint scent of mildew and something else I couldn't quite place. Something metallic. As I moved deeper underground, the whispers grew louder, overlapping each other until they became a cacophony of voices. Some called my name, others whispered warnings or pleas for help. It was maddening, disorienting, and yet somehow familiar. At the end of the corridor was a heavy wooden door etched with intricate carvings. They matched the symbols on the map, swirling together in patterns that shifted whenever I blinked. There was no handle, no obvious way to open it, but as soon as I reached out to touch the wood, the door swung inward on its own. Inside was a room unlike anything I'd ever seen. The walls were covered in shelves filled with books, jars, and strange artifacts, feathers, bones, shards of glass. In the center of the room stood a large table, its surface cluttered with papers, quills, and ink pots. But what drew my attention was the figure seated at the table. She looked up when I entered, her piercing gaze locking onto mine. Her face was pale, almost translucent, and her eyes were an unnatural shade of silver. She wore a dress made of tattered black fabric that seemed to shimmer faintly in the dim light. For a moment, neither of us spoke. Then she smiled, a slow, deliberate curve of her lips that sent shivers down my spine. "You've come far," she said, her voice soft but commanding. "Farther than most. Who are you?" I managed to ask, though my voice trembled. Her smile widened. "I'm the keeper, the cartographer, the witness." She gestured to the map in my hand. "And you, Evelyn, are one of my marks." One of her marks. The words hit me like a punch to the gut. I glanced down at the map again, noticing for the first time that the symbols surrounding my name weren't just decorative. They formed chains. Chains that seemed to tighten around me the longer I held the map. "What do you mean, one of your marks?" I demanded, trying to keep my voice steady. "What is this thing?" She leaned back in her chair, studying me with an expression that was equal parts curiosity and amusement. "It's a map of your life," she said simply. "Every decision you've made, every path you've taken, it's all here. But it's also more than that. It's a map of your potential, of the lives you could have lived, the choices you might still make." My head spun. "That's impossible." "Is it?" she countered. "You followed the map here, didn't you? Even though every instinct told you not to. Why do you think that is?" I didn't have an answer. All I knew was that the map had brought me here for a reason, and whatever that reason was, it wasn't going to be pleasant. The keeper rose from her seat and circled the table, her movements fluid and unervingly silent. "Tell me, Evelyn," she said, stopping just inches away from me. "Have you ever wondered why some doors close while others remain open? Why certain paths seem to vanish the moment you step off them?" I shook my head, too overwhelmed to speak. "It's because I decide," she whispered, her breath icy against my ear. "I chart the courses, draw the lines, weave the threads. And sometimes," she paused, tilting her head as if considering her next words carefully. "Sometimes I erase them." A chill ran through me. "Erase them? What does that mean?" Her smile returned, colder this time. "It means endings, Evelyn. Finalities. The kind of conclusions that leave no room for second chances." Suddenly, the pieces began to fall into place. The whispers, the figure in the coat, the map itself. None of it was meant to guide me. It was meant to warn me, to show me what would happen if I strayed too far from the path she had laid out for me. "But why me?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. "Why am I on your map?" For the first time, her expression softened, though it did little to comfort me. "Because you're special, Evelyn. Your thread is unique, one of the few I haven't been able to fully unravel. Not yet. Anyway, her words hung in the air between us, heavy with implication. Before I could press her further, the ground beneath my feet began to tremble. The shelves rattled, sending books and jars crashing to the floor. The keeper's smile faltered, replaced by a look of genuine concern. "They've found us," she murmured, glancing toward the doorway. "You shouldn't be here." "Who's found us?" I demanded, panic rising in my chest. Instead of answering, she grabbed my wrist and dragged me toward a hidden alcove in the wall. Inside was another staircase, even narrower than the first. Without hesitation, she shoved me forward, forcing me to climb upward. "Keep going," she shouted behind me. "Don't stop until you're safe." Safe? How could I possibly be safe after everything I just learned? As I ascended, the whispers returned, louder and more frantic than before. They weren't guiding me anymore. They were begging me to turn back. But I couldn't. Not now. Because deep down, I knew the truth. The map hadn't brought me here to save me. It had brought me here to choose. The staircase seemed endless, spiraling upward in tight, suffocating circles. My legs burned with every step, but I didn't dare stop. Not with the keeper's urgency still ringing in my ears and the whispers clawing in my mind. The air grew warmer as I climbed, until it felt like I was wading through molten heat. Finally, I reached the top, a trapdoor that creaked open to reveal the pale light of dawn filtering through a dense canopy of trees. I emerged into a forest I didn't recognize. The map in my hand pulsed faintly, its symbols shifting again, rearranging themselves into something new. This time, there was no question where it wanted me to go. A single path stretched ahead, marked by glowing threads woven into the bark of the trees on either side. Each thread bore a name, names I recognized. Friends, family, strangers I'd passed on the street. And then, finally mine, Evelyn. One of the whispers hissed, louder than the others. "Cut the thread." I froze, staring at the delicate silver strand labeled with my name. It shimmered innocently, almost invitingly, as if daring me to touch it. But why would I cut it? What would happen if I did? Before I could decide, movement caught my eye, a shadow darting between the trees. At first, I thought it was the figure in the coat again, come to chase me down. But as it drew closer, I realized it wasn't human at all. Its form flickered and shifted, never quite solidifying, but its presence was undeniable. It radiated malice, a seething hatred that made the hair on the back of my neck stand up. "You shouldn't be here," it growled, its voice a guttural blend of countless others. She broke the rules. Rules? What rules? Was this thing talking about the keeper? Before I could ask, it lunged at me, claws extended. Instinctively, I stumbled backward, clutching the map tighter. The map reacted instantly, its surface flaring with blinding light. The creature recoiled, letting out an ear-splitting shriek before dissolving into smoke. But the respite was short-lived. More shadows began to gather, circling me like predators closing in on their prey. I turned in frantic circles, searching for an escape, but the only way out was forward, down the glowing path toward my thread. That's when I noticed something strange. The threads weren't just marking the path, they were unraveling. One by one, they slipped free from the trees, vanishing into thin air. As each thread disappeared, a distant scream echoed through the forest, a sound so raw and agonizing it made my chest tighten. Someone, somewhere was dying. And then I understood. The threads weren't just labels or markers, they were lifelines. Cutting them meant ending lives, ending fates. The keeper hadn't brought me here to save me. She'd brought me here to decide, to choose who lived and who died. My hands trembled as I stared at my own thread. If I cut it, would it end everything? Would it stop the shadows, silence the whispers, undo whatever curse had been placed upon me? Or would it simply erase me from existence, leaving behind nothing but emptiness? But cutting my thread wouldn't solve anything. Not really. Because deep down, I knew the truth. The keeper wasn't the villain in this story. She was just another pawn, tasked with maintaining order in a world teetering on chaos. If I destroyed my thread, someone else would take my place. Another Evelyn, another Mark, another life erased. So instead, I did the unthinkable. I wrapped my fingers around the thread and yanked it free myself. For a moment, Nothing happened. Then the forest erupted in screams, not just mine, but everyone's. The ground beneath me split open, swallowing the trees, the shadows, the very fabric of reality itself. I fell, tumbling through darkness until I landed hard on cold tile. When I opened my eyes, I was back in my kitchen. The map lay on the table, blank and lifeless. No symbols, no whispers, no glowing warmth. Just paper. Relief washed over me. Or at least, it should have. But as I stood there, catching my breath, I noticed something scrawled across the ceiling in jagged handwriting. You can't outrun the quiet place. And then, from somewhere deep within the walls of my house, came the faintest whisper. Find me. The lingering question. Did Evelyn truly escape her fate? Or did cutting her thread merely reset the cycle? And what happens when the quiet place decides it's time to collect again? Final thoughts for retention and engagement. This twist leaves viewers questioning whether Evelyn made the right choice, and debating whether freedom is even possible when your life has already been mapped out. Encourage them to share their theories in the comments. Did she break the loop, or is she doomed to repeat it forever?